Okay, hello, this is Dave Banaszak. Currently an adjunct professor at Clark State Community College, office manager for Clark County Right to Life, and welcome to the 17th Life Tech Conference, the first ever virtual, October 24th, 2020. Now, this paper here was originally presented at the 26th Annual Conference of the University Faculty for Life at Marquette University. If you can look, I'll just put a book up. They have a proceedings for this. So if you want to go to the reference paper, I'm not sure how that's viewed there, but you can always refer to that. So it's proceedings of the 26th University Faculty for Life Conference at Marquette University, 2016. So most of the data is through 2016. So I will just have a few updates since then. I'm waiting for the 2020 census to do more updates. Okay, they're going to put this on this side. So here's some past headlines. The SNS is a Springfield News Sun newspaper. They did this research back in 2016, and these are some of the headlines in the paper. The population falls, but kept saying losses are slowed. That was in 2016. Then in March of 2016, we had the Clark population was lowest since 1962. And that's when it looked like about the time that the county actually had more deaths than births. And Clark County leaders also kept hearing a plea for funding from Planned Parenthood at several meetings. And one of the purposes of this paper is it's shown that Planned Parenthood apparently is succeeding. The population is declining in Clark County, but the impact of this is not necessarily what they were hoping for. Then you can see they got more grants. They had a grant a couple years ago again. And this is just some of the past grants that I found from the research of the paper in the Springfield News Sun. Now, before going on, I want to kind of refer you to Clark County. I was hoping to have a pointer, but here's our map of Ohio, just to get you guys situated with Ohio, because this is just about one specific county in the whole United States. Clark County, you can see in the southwest corner of Ohio, as you go up from Hamilton County and Claremont County, you move north to Montgomery County, and just northeast of Montgomery County, you see Clark County. That's where we are at. This is the county that we are talking about. So we had some quick facts that I got back in 2016 from one of the census websites. And in 2014, the county population was 136,554. I did a quick check just before this presentation. As of July 1st, 2019, the estimated population is 134,585. So it looks like the downward trend in population is continuing. And then we got some other demographics about the county for your reference. We are kind of an elderly population, and you can see our race and Hispanic origin is made up. We're getting more Hispanics as time goes on, and some of the other basic facts about Clark County, just to introduce Clark County a little bit. So here's our graph, and I don't think the yellow shows up real good, but the blue line is Clark County. Population since looks like about 1820 all the way up to 2010, according to census data. And as you can see, the blue line is Clark County. It goes way up, and about 1960, it has done nothing but go down. Then I broke it out to Springfield and non-Springfield. The pink line is Springfield, and city of Springfield has also had a pretty dramatic population decline, and non-Springfield out in the suburban areas of the county, it's actually kind of flat. So it looks like most of this loss is due to population decline in the city of Springfield, which is the county seat and the biggest city in Clark County. So I just thought I'd give that graph as a little bit of an introduction. See how our time's going here. So here is a graph. This is what I had in the original presentation back in 2016. The blue line, this CCDH is the Clark County Department of Health. That's data from that particular place. And the pink line is the deaths. And you can see by 2014, which is the end of the graph, we actually have more deaths than births in Clark County over the past 4 or 5 years up to 2014. Now, what I did just to update this paper a little bit, I didn't get all the updates I wanted, but I got a little bit of the updates I wanted, is I did get, that's not a very good graph. Something got boogered up with that graph, but what that graph shows is that the decline and wonder what happened there. That's a technical glitch of some kind. Technology is great until it doesn't work. But I'll go back to the previous graph, and if you extend that line, what's happening is the deaths are still going up, or staying stable, or going up, and the births are still declining. We're actually down almost close to 1,000 births in the county for the whole year in 2018, and a lot of the data since that time is just not showing very good stuff. So let me fly by this one because I'm not sure what happened, because that just added 4 more years onto it. I just added 50 more years onto mine because I said, what happened to that graph? But here's a map showing poverty in Clark County, in Ohio. And again, Clark County, if you go about 1/3 of the way from the west to the east, and about 1/3 of the way from the south to the north, you'll see Clark County, and you can see that it's in an orange area. So poverty is in about the 16 to 19% range. I'm not sure how big this will show up in the presentation, but so we do have poverty in Clark County, as we have in many counties. We're not in the red area, but we're in the gold area. Okay, unwed births. Now this one's really kind of hard to see, but if you see the dark purple, you see Montgomery County and Clark County, we're in the dark purple. And unbelievable, to me it's unbelievable. Births to unmarried women 18 to 54, the percent of the births. The Clark County rate was 53.8%, that looks like, which is over half the births are births to unwed mothers. I was going to say unwed parents, but I guess it's basically mothers are the ones that are giving the birth. So this is just to give a little bit of idea. The other variable, I looked at different variables compared to birth rates, and the other variable I looked at is drug overdose death rates back at that time. The drug overdose death rates were starting to go up, and I was able to find some data on it. And I think, again, in Clark County, we are not quite the darkest shade, but the middle shade there looks like 16.5 to 20.5. And it's a little bit hard to read, but so we're not doing good in that area either. So what's the object of this paper? This paper is, I'm going to look at the declining births and compare them to things like poverty rate and drug overdose rate, et cetera, and see if there's correlation between those particular variables. Actually, altogether, I've had 8 different variables that I looked at. Births per the Clark County Health Department, births per the Ohio Department of Health, of course, births to unwed mothers, and I got the data as far back as I could find. Percent of births to unwed mothers, so it's kind of a 2 ways of presenting that data. Deaths from 1990 to 2014, abortions from 1991 to 2014. A lot of these beginning dates is from when I could find good data from the sources. Poverty rates in percents, and drug overdose deaths for a 11-year period. I'm anxious to get that updated. I'm kind of, like I said earlier, I'm waiting for the 2020 census to try to update some of these numbers. But anyhow, we have these variables that I studied, and we looked at the correlation between the variables. Now, correlation is a statistical term. Usually the correlation runs between 0 and +1, which means if variables have a high relationship, they go +1 or -1, depending on there's plus or minus correlation. And if there's a low relationship, the correlation will be closer to 0. So that's the earlier the years, the harder it is to get the data, but that's kind of beside the point. So how did I do the data collection? Most of it was done online. Got a lot from the Ohio Department of Health website. Has a lot of good data. They have an extremely large report every year on a number of abortions in Ohio. It's about 70, 80 pages. It does spell out how many abortions there are in Clark County. In the Clark County Health Department, I also got emails from the Clark County Health Department that gave me the data as far as the Clark County Health Department was concerned for a number of births and deaths. And of course, some of the data is sort of hard to get because they're in various data formats. So you have to kind of get all this stuff in the common data format. And that's what I did on the next spreadsheet that I'll show later. And of course, the U.S. Census Bureau has a lot of data, some of it's actual census type data, some of it's actually survey type data. For example, that earlier population figure is from one of their census surveys for the population in Clark County in 2019. So just how does this data look? Oh, I forgot some stuff. Yeah, we had birth data all the way back to 1911 from the Clark County Health Department. That was harder to find in some of the other sources. Not that it doesn't exist, it's just hard to find. Ooh, we have technical glitch number 2 here. Technical glitch number 2. Don't know if they can see me, but we have a spreadsheet here. I kind of show that. But the main thing, I'll describe the spreadsheet. We have columns: years, births, Clark County Health Department; births, Ohio Department of Health; unwed births, Ohio Department of Health; percent unwed births, Ohio Department of Health; deaths from the Clark County Health Department; abortions from the Ohio Department of Health; poverty rate, and drug overuse abuse. Not sure why that didn't show up. Clark County births since 1990.
We'll update the video with the
Okay. Okay, we'll update the video with the current charts later. My technical director just informed me that. That's great. So we have 2 charts that didn't show up quite right. Ohio Department of Health. So here's the Clark County births since 1990. So that's the most recent years. It's a little bit hard to tell in this graph, but the dark blue is data from the Clark County Health Department, and the blue data is from the Ohio Department of Health. I have not yet figured out why there is sort of a little bit of a discrepancy, but in the world of statistics, variability and uncertainty is the name of the game sometimes. So as you can see, the births are declining. Back in 1990, we had over 2,000 births a year. Now we're down to 1,600 or 1,500, depending on which source you look at. Sometimes I was thinking about this when I was reviewing this paper, and maybe this is because Department of Health gets information from the county that is not, available in Clark County, such as people that are born in other counties. I mean, people that live in other counties that had births in other counties that probably should really be credited to Clark County. But that does show the downward trend in births, and that is continuing. We have a project at Clark County Right to Life where we send birth cards to the parents of all new mothers, trying to encourage them to have babies. And right now we get about 100 per month, which is about 1,200 per year. So that shows, indicates this downward decline is continuing. And then just the next graph, Okay, shows that the percent of births to unwed mothers in the county is probably not unlike the national trend. Back in 1990, if you kind of eyeball that, you get about 31% of the births in Clark County were to unwed mothers. Now, in 2014 or 2015, the latest year I have data, it's more like 54%. So more than half the births are born to mothers that are not married at the time of birth, which is a pretty dramatic change. And I think if you go back further years, it'd be even more dramatic. But that's sort of the time history data part of this. So let's continue on. Let's look at our analysis. I'm hoping all this stuff comes out okay. Method of analysis, we use this program called XLStat at the university. We were using that for our course at the time. That was an add-in for Excel. And this generated tables of Pearson correlation coefficients, which I just want to re-explain. We'll call that R in our plots. But that just shows the relationship between variables. If it's close to plus or minus 1, there's a strong relationship. If it's close to 0, there's not a very strong relationship. And we did what they call scatter plots for each of the pairs of variables and computed p-values, which are probability values for each correlation computed. And usually how that goes is as p gets less than 0.05, the smaller the p-value is, the more confidence we have that those correlations are indeed significant. And we'll look at some of the scatter plots with higher correlations. So we made this huge table, which I was afraid would not come out because there seems to be we'll look at this one later, but those little yellow marks highlights the high correlation of some of the high correlation values between births and percent unwed births for mothers, between abortions and births, between poverty and births, and between drug overdose and births. I did notice today, looking at this, there are some other high correlation problems, but mainly in this paper, I've been looking at the correlation between the variables and births.
Talk about the table as if it's fine, because I'll just put it directly in the video.
So as I said, the yellow highlighted marks are some of the variables that have the highest correlation with respect to births. And I'm going to hone in on that in the next charts. Okay. So this is a little bit clear. This came from that eyeglass table that we just went by. But the unwed birth percent versus Department of Health births, we had a correlation factor of 0.899 minus, I'm sorry, you got to remember the sign. That's what I tell my students, remember the sign, minus 0.899, which means as the births increased, the unwed birth percentage decreased. So higher birth rates, when we had higher birth rates, we had lower unwed birth percentage. The other one was abortion versus the births, and that had a positive correlation coefficient, so which means as the births increase, abortions increase, or the births decrease, abortions decrease. And I also suspect some of the pregnancies increase. Then the next factor is poverty percent versus the births, and this again has a pretty high correlation coefficient of minus 0.809, which is a negative correlation coefficient. So as the births increase, the poverty percent decrease. So it's not what you would expect. You would expect as births decrease, supposedly that the poverty percent would decrease also, but it's opposite effect. I thought I just happened to, at that time, Clark County was having the beginning of a interesting thing to compare to, and we find that as the births increase, the drug overdose death rate would decrease, or conversely, as the births decrease, the drug overdose death rate would increase. Now, we just got to remember in statistics, correlations do not prove cause and effect. They just prove an association between variables. But one note I thought about these correlations oppose a lot of Planned Parenthood assumptions, because they keep saying if we control our population, with things, all these nasty things would start to go down. But these associations show kind of the opposite of what their assumptions are. I'm going to pray for this one. Okay. I'm going to make believe this is working good. This is a scatter plot of the percent of unwed versus Ohio Department of Health births. And it shows R squared value, which is the correlation coefficient squared, is equal to 0.8083. And as you see from the graph, as the births are decreasing, the percent of unwed unwed births are decreasing. In other words, higher birth rates would be lower percent unwed births, but lower births give a higher percent of unwed births. I think all these graphs are going to be the same. Hopefully we'll get them in okay. I'm going to make believe I got them. And here we're going to show that abortions versus births from 1991 to 2014. We have, again, a correlation line there. We can actually fit a line through this stuff, what they call a regression line in statistics. But here we see that abortions and births kind of go hand in hand, which sort of makes sense because the less births, probably the less people getting pregnant, and probably less people that are going to be wanting to have abortions. Next scatter plot. Ooh, this one is beautiful, beautiful. I see data on this one. So our poverty percent versus Ohio Department of Health births from 2000 to 2014. Here we have an R squared of 0.654. If you take the square root of R squared, you'll get R. But then again, we show that as the births tend to increase, the poverty rate actually tends to decrease. So, people that are trying to cut back on births actually are helping us to get increased poverty rate, at least if we look at these correlations and associations. And we have another beautiful one. We got scatter plot of drug overdose deaths versus births. And this is not quite as strong of a correlation. R squared, you got to take square root of 0.6 to get R, but because R squared is always positive, but R is going to be negative in this case, so it would be the negative square root. But as you see, the correlation is not real strong, but there is a correlation between drug overdose deaths and births, at least during that short time period of 11 years. And this is going to be very interesting when I get after the 2020 census to see if I can update all this data too. So let me look at the future studies. Consider additional variables, amount of funding to Planned Parenthood for each year, rate of teenage pregnancy, per capita income. Lots of data we can look at and analyze. That's the great thing. I'm sure the big data people could do a lot of this pretty quick. So I'm going to get data for more years. This is sort of the same conclusions I had back in 2016, but like I said, I'm waiting for the census. We can look at variables using the analysis of variance. That's ANOVA. And analyze variables using multiple regression. In other words, we could look at maybe 3 variables versus birth rates. And these are some fancier analysis that right now I'm not sure I can do, but that would be something you could do. Of course, the other thing I noted, and I haven't got my round to it yet, is expand the study of the states or the U.S. as a whole. And lastly, I don't have on here, but we need to update data after the 2020 census. We're getting close to the end. Beautiful. This one came out beautiful. Changes in Clark County since 1971. I forgot to mention, I moved here in 1971 from the beautiful state of Wisconsin to the wonderful state of Ohio. And and have seen our congressional representation go down every single year because the population in Ohio as a whole has not been increasing as much as the rest of the nation. But just when we drive around town, this was in 2016, I mean, these were some of the things that were happening. And it's still pretty much true. They're spending millions of dollars on it right now, but the driving downtown shopping is gone. They used to have big department stores there and all that, but now it's just kind of little shops, and the city's trying a violent job to get things going again, but it is a big struggle and lots of money is being spent on that. That would be another analysis I'd like to look at, is how much money has been spent on reviving the downtown versus the birth rate. I'm sure the lower the birth rate, the more is spent downtown. There'll probably be a negative correlation there. That's kind of an opinion piece thrown in here. Now there's a mall in Clark County called the Springfield Mall. In 2016, it was down to 1 box store, and now it's down to 0 box stores. And Sears closed here just in the past year. And the stores that are there, I think I do daily walks in the mall, or when the weather is bad and when they let us in there. There is probably no more than a dozen stores left there that are all small stores. The public school enrollments have been going down. I don't have that complete data on that right now. Just I read in the papers that the enrollment's gone down about 10, 15 years ago. They built all kinds of new schools, and I know there's one school that's not even being fully utilized since they built the new schools in the city of Springfield. So, and as I alluded to in point number 1, there's a high investment required to reinvigorate the downtown. Mucho dollars being spent. Prison population as 2016 was higher, and the population is aging. The county definitely has an aging population. You could go back, look at that first quick fact sheet and see that we have a pretty high percentage of senior citizens. There's a decrease in manufacturing jobs, decline in middle class. These are kind of general statements. And being a Catholic, when I first moved to this town in 1971, there were 5 churches, 5 pastors. Now there's 4 churches, 2 pastors in Springfield. There's only 1 high school and 5 grade schools. That's what they had when I moved here, and now they have 1 grade school and 1 high school, and right now I think they're almost down to 1 high school, because 4 years have passed since 2016. I'll have to get up-to-date data on that. And about 5 or 10 years ago, the community had to merge their hospital. They used to have a Catholic hospital and a public hospital, and had to merge them into 1 hospital. I'm not sure why, but I'm sure population issues might have played some kind of part in that. So my summaries and conclusions are: there's negative correlation between percent of unwed births and births. So funds to reduce births is of questionable value in that case, unless you, right now, if that correlation would continue, that would kind of imply that as we decrease our births, we're going to have a higher percent of unwed births. Again, there's a negative correlation between births and poverty rates. So if we keep decreasing the births, it looks like poverty rates are tending upward. Again, I'm saying that's not cause and effect, but that there is an association that we can make between the 2 variables. There's negative correlation between births and overdose deaths, and a positive correlation between births and abortions. And in a way that sort of makes sense, because less births, less pregnancies, less abortions, maybe. And also there could be other factors involved too, but we'll just think about that one. That's a good one for food for thought. So my initial indication is funds to reduce births is not good. Less births correspond to higher percent of unwed births. Less births correspond to higher poverty rates. Less births correspond to high drug overdose rates. So is population decline good or bad? My answer is it's not good. And being that we're on a virtual seminar here, if you have questions, just be sure to send them in to our question box. That concludes my presentation.